Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Connecticut, we have Megan Pereira. Megan is the founder of Road to Refuge Animal Sanctuary. She works full-time as a mixed animal veterinary technician. She also coordinates all potential rescues and tends to the medical needs of animals, as well as running day-to-day activities at Road to Refuge. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. With your full-time job, how do you find the time needed to run a sanctuary?
It's definitely hard. I would say I have a lot of support. We have a couple of really dedicated volunteers who help on a few set days of the week. We do have one employee who's actually become a very, very good friend of mine as well, and she helps a few days a week. But let me tell you, it's hard. It never stops. I'm constantly exhausted. I have two babies in the house right now, a sheep and a goat, and that it just never stops. So there's never enough time.
Now, your husband and you both work full-time.
Yes, we do.
So how is it possible that you can work full-time and take care of the animals?
Well, so I wake up very early and go to bed very late. And we do most of the chores before and after work. And then we have some volunteers who come. I do have somebody who comes every single day, midday, to do lunch checks for me. They're amazing. They come, they run around, they check everybody's water, make sure everybody's good, just kind of puts eyes on everybody. And then on top of that, my parents actually live on the property. So they live in an apartment on the property, and my mom works from home. So there's always somebody here, which is nice. So if the person who comes, our volunteer who comes and sort of checks on anyone, if she has any concerns, she just, will call my mom. She's on the board, and she's more behind the scenes and does a lot of the financial stuff and helps me organize donors and things like that, Patreon, et cetera. But she's got a pretty good handle on what goes on around here day to day. So if there's anything of concern, she'll call me, at work and let me know what's going on.
Now, you mentioned you wake up at 5 a.m. Can you give us a general idea of your day?
Yes. I get up at 5 and feed. We have three rescue dogs in the house and a little rescue cat. And so we feed everybody inside. And then, like I said, I have Graham Lamb. He's currently in the house right now, recovering from surgery. And then I have a little blind baby goat, Truffle. She's in the house right now. So they get fed, they get cleaned, they get all situated. And then I'm usually out to the barn by 6. And we feed everybody out there. We feed the horses, and then I move on to all the sanctuary animals. And then I go to work full time. So usually 8 to 5-ish, come home, feed all of the animals if they already haven't. Usually the evening shift is what I normally have covered, just because my work can be very unpredictable. If something comes in and needs emergency surgery and I get stuck there for 3 hours. So it's important to me to have somebody every single day feeding the animals for me at night. And we've got all those days covered, thankfully. So usually when I come home from work, I'm just kind of going out and checking on everybody, making sure everyone's situated, settled. Then it doesn't stop there because I go to the gym.
Really?
After that, yeah, I'm pretty big into fitness and trying to, by working out, it helps me on a day-to-day basis. I'm carrying bales of hay and bags of shavings and bags of grain. So, and my full-time job is extremely strenuous. So it helps me stay in shape to do the things that I love. So, so then I'll go to the gym, come home, and by that time it's usually like around 10 o'clock after I've sat down and eaten, and I go up for bed checks, make sure everyone's situated, everyone's got fresh hay, fresh water, they're all cozy, and then lights out, and we do it all over the next day.
Wow. So every day you get up at like 5, go to bed about 11, every single day, this is your routine.
This is my life. Yes.
Wow, that's so inspiring. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a labor of love, I'll say that.
What is it about animals that made you want to start a sanctuary?
I think wanting to start the sanctuary stemmed from wanting to show people that they're not just a goat or just a cow. You know, when I started the sanctuary, I wasn't vegan, but I was very much wanting to show people that they're sentient beings and that they have feelings and that they should be treated with the utmost respect. So that's kind of where that stemmed from, I think.
Now, you mentioned you weren't vegan. Can you tell us about your vegan journey?
Yeah, so I started rescuing animals since 2016. We took in a few goats. We took in, just a hodgepodge of things. We had the dogs that we rescued. We then moved to our new property, which is our current property now in North Haven. And I had a little special needs goat that we took in from work. And then it just kind of kept happening. I was known at work as the girl who, like, if someone was going to euthanize one of their farm animals for a reason that could be fixed, they would just call me and be like, "Hey, Meg, do you want this animal?" So I would be like, "Okay." I'd call my husband and be like, "Hey, this is the situation. Can we take it?" And he'd say yes. And, so we started growing. And one day, one of my coworkers said to me, "Hey, you should become a nonprofit because you're taking in a lot of animals and you could start fundraising and, be a small animal sanctuary." And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, what? Like, that's a thing? So then I started doing some research, and then finally we came to fruition in, I think, February of 2019. We were officially incorporated as a nonprofit. Finally, we were focused mostly on goats. That was sort of my thing. I loved them so much. And, that was one of the biggest things that would come into the office at work, and people just didn't want to put the money into them. And it just kept breaking my heart. And so that's how I ended up with, like, my first 5 goats here, was all owner surrenders from work because they needed, one had a fractured leg or one was an orphan, and simply they just didn't want to bottle feed it. Farmers can be pretty cruel sometimes. And, not all of them. Like, I unfortunately do have a pretty wide variety of farmers that I know personally because of my job. And so, there are the ones that do right by their animals. And while I don't agree with their choices for their fate of their animals, there are the ones that do care for them very well, much, on a smaller scale than commercial farming for sure. We don't deal with any commercial farms. But then there are also the ones who just don't really care, don't have the time, energy, money, or compassion to put towards any effort for their animals, and they just, the slightest thing goes wrong and they just want to euthanize them. So those are usually where I get most of our rescues from. But along those lines, later that year, we came along a little cow who was posted online because they thought he was blind. His name was, we named him, but we named him Jack Daniels. And he came from an absolute terrible, terrible place. It was like he was standing in his own filth, and he was chained to a wall with a piece of baling twine around his neck. And he almost didn't make it. He was very, very sick. He didn't get enough colostrum from his mom. And so he was the reason, after seeing what he had gone through and how much he had fought just to stay alive, he's the reason that I decided to make the full transition to veganism. I was a vegetarian before that, but, his impact, seeing him, the stress and the abuse that he went through just for there's the rescue dog I was talking about. It's never quiet here, but guys, you're okay. It's fine. But yeah, seeing everything that he went through just to put a glass of milk on somebody's table was just not worth it to me. And that's when I decided to go completely vegan.
And when was that?
That was September 2019, I think.
I'm not going to hold you to it.
A year.
I'm not going to hold it to you.
Don't hold me to it. Nobody Google it. I don't know. It might be off a year. I honestly, it all blurs. It might be 2020. I think maybe 2020. Now I can't remember. If you look back at my Instagram, whenever we got JD is when I went vegan.
Okay, well, research that. What is the feeling you get from saving and rehabilitating an animal?
Oh my God. It's like nothing else, honestly. It's like, I feel grateful to have had the opportunity to save the animal, to then be able to have that animal for like the rest of its life, to be able to show it compassion and love and let it, go out with all the other animals here and make friends and form bonds and, do all the things that they're supposed to be doing. They wouldn't have had a chance to do. I'm just grateful to be able to provide that life for animals who would have otherwise been euthanized or slaughtered and things like that.
Now, how difficult is it to always take in animals in need of medical care?
It is very difficult financially, mostly, for sure. We can't just sweep that under the rug. It's extremely financially taxing. The reason I do it is because I have my medical background, my veterinary background, and I can. I work at the vet's office, and right now, Graham, who had major orthopedic surgery, which was like a $8,000 vet bill, he comes to work with me every day while he's on sort of stall rest. He's not in a stall, but confined. He has to be confined until he gets the all clear from his vet. So he comes with me every single day, and it's hard. It's hard. He's all the animals, like if at the drop of a hat, if somebody's sick or somebody's not doing well in the morning when I'm out doing chores, I just load them up in the truck and they come with me to work. So it's nice to be able to do that, but it also, taking in the medical cases is definitely a financial strain for sure. We try to fundraise as much as we can, but ultimately we always do end up paying a little bit out of pocket for some things, unfortunately.
Now, in late January, you walked out to the barn and you found your goat Peachy with a broken leg. Can you take us back to that moment?
Yeah. So that was probably the hardest day of my life. We walked out to the barn it was a Monday, I think, maybe. No, maybe, I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know. But I got home from work and I went up to the barn, and Bobby, who is my employee / best friend, who now works for the sanctuary, she was up there and she had done chores that day. And PT was fine. She was great with her. And so I just went in there mostly to cuddle with her, and I would get her up and, clean her up and, just spend time with her every single day. And I walked in and I went to go lift her up, and her leg was just dangling in the air. And I just immediately started sobbing. And I called the vet that was on call at my office, and I told them what was going on and that I was getting her in the truck and coming right down. We got to the office and we confirmed that her leg was broken. We then called Tufts because it was something that, with her other extensive issues, orthopedic issues going on, it was something that we weren't really equipped to handle at my office. So Bobby drove me an hour and a half up to Tufts, dropped Peachy off, and yeah, that was that day.
Can you tell us more about what happened with Peachy?
Yeah, so they knew, or at least they said that they knew, the extent of her disabilities when I dropped her off there. and I don't think that they actually were comprehending and like remembered who she was. She had been there before when she was a baby.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't seen her in probably 8 months. So it was late at night. It was like probably 10:30 by the time we got there, and they were just gonna stabilize her leg and get her started on some pain meds. And then they called me the next day. Yes, so it had to have been a Thursday, because when I went up there, it was Friday the next day. Excuse me. And so they had called me the next morning after the doctors had looked at her. And basically, long story short, they recommended that surgery was not an option for her. And that they said that even if I wanted to go forward with surgery, they wouldn't, because it was not humane for her, and that it wasn't fair to her, and that they recommended euthanasia.
How did you feel at that moment when they told you that?
I was actually on a farm call at my job, and we were just doing herd health, small farmer, running through his goats and sheep, just vaccinating. And I told the doctor that if my phone rang, I had to answer it. So it rang, and I walked over into the corner of the pen, and the doctor told me all of that, and I just started sobbing, and just fell down on the ground in this pen full of sheep and goats. It was really hard, and I feel like I maybe blacked out a little bit. I didn't really know what was going on, and I just kind of looked at the vet that was, there with me, and sort of made eye contact with her while I was crying, and she kind of gave me the go ahead to go sit in in the vet truck. So I went in the truck, and then I had to call my husband and tell him what was going on, and then I called my mom also. And everyone kind of was like, listen, we pay this hospital for their medical advice, and because there was a big thing about me getting a second opinion and doing all this, transporting her all over the place just for a second opinion. And they kind of had to talk me down and be like, Meg, she's in a lot of pain. The next closest hospital is Cornell, which is 6 hours. So we're going to drive her up there, load her into a car, drive her 6 hours. So she's even farther away from home for them to tell you very likely the same thing. And they kind of had to, I was extremely upset and not rational at the time. And they sort of had to be like, Meg, you have to listen to the doctors, which was really hard for me to do, because taking in the special needs animals and the medical cases, I always want to do everything I possibly can for them, but I also want to do what's best for them. And sometimes those lines can get blurred, I think, when you're so invested. And it's really important to have people around you that can be your voice of reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very thankful for my husband and my mom to be like, it's okay. Like, we have to let her go. And despite me not being okay, I couldn't be selfish and keep her, here for me when her poor little body was ready to go. So.
How do you do it? How do you continue knowing that this will happen again and again and again?
Honestly, it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. I didn't leave my bed for 3 days after we lost her. I'm very thankful that I have a really strong support system, between my husband and my mom and Bobby and all my volunteers. They all really stepped up, and they're like, it's fine. Take the time that you need to grieve. And we've got everybody outside, just take care of you. And I know a lot of people aren't that fortunate in terms of sanctuary people, founders and workers and things like that. Sometimes they don't have that support system to be able to just press pause and take care of themselves. But I would urge anybody who's listening to this and they're finding themselves kind of alone running their sanctuary and running themselves down to the bare bones, to find yourself a really good support system, because I don't know how I would have gotten through it if I didn't have that. And it's really important to take care of yourself, because if you don't, then the animals aren't going to have anybody.
Now, you were in bed for 3 days. What did you learn from that experience?
Honestly, I don't think I learned anything. I was just sad. I was I'm fortunate to say that I haven't lost any human in my life of this amount of significance. This is the greatest loss I've ever experienced. And I know I'm fortunate to be able to say that. And I know some people might think that how could you compare this goat loss to a human loss? But for me, it was the most intense loss I've ever experienced. It's the most intense grief. And I'm still grieving. I'm still receiving sympathy cards in the mail. I actually just 2 days ago received a really beautiful keychain that had some wings and said Peachy on it, like from our supporters. And, she touched so many hearts and affected so many people. I think that was probably if I had to think of one thing that I learned, it would be that she touched so many people across literally the world, like people from Europe and Italy. And I have supporters from Canada and Spain, and just literally everywhere. And the outpouring of love that I received, I think, and everyone who was impacted by Peachy, was really, really inspiring to me.
How does that make you feel when all these people send you things from other places to recognize the care that you've taken for some of these animals?
Weird. Honestly, it made me feel surreal, I think. I'm like, what? Like, I never thought that any of this would be possible. I never thought that anyone, I was taking in a couple of goats in our small little barn. Like, I never thought that we'd get to the point where we're at now. Big enough where people across the world would recognize one of my goats on the internet or know my Instagram page or things like that. But it also makes me feel sort of like thankful and grateful that I could provide, just like so thankful that I could show the world that she's not just a goat, and that if I could show them that she's not just a goat, that would then transpire into they are not just goats, and they are not just cows, they are not just sheep, they are not just pigs. Like, they are sentient beings that truly deserve so much more than what the most of the world is giving them.
Now, you mentioned you had a baby blind goat right now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that goat?
Yeah, so her name is Truffle. She is the sweetest little thing. She came to us from Georgia. So a lot of people on the internet are, and I also agree, she's a spitting image of Peachy. And she also came from Georgia as well. So it's kind of a weird coincidence. She actually came to me the day got the call about Peachy. Obviously, I didn't tell anybody other than my direct family and friends. And my friend Leanne over at Goats of Anarchy, she had messaged me and was like, hey, we have this goat. not from her directly, but she was like, someone contacted me about this goat. She's blind and she needs placement. And I already have another blind goat who actually Leanne organized me to get as well. I have a sweet spot for the blind babies, and I knew she needed a friend. And so then I was like, it's a sign. It's a sign that Peachy's leaving and I'm able to rescue another being, and the like similarities of them are just truly quite impressive. I posted a video on Instagram of them like side by side, like one transitioning into the other, and everyone's like, oh my God, like it's uncanny. So she's kind of like my little light in all of this, which was really nice. It's nice to help you have something to get up and take care of and, get you through the day. And she definitely helped a lot in my grieving process, that's for sure.
You say you have 2 blind goats. How do they end up blind?
So my first one was, her name is Reese, and she had a really, really high fever when she was a baby. And so it was just a result of her being really sick. She just went blind and she never gained her sight back. Truffle, I still have, the jury's still out on her. I think that she can see a little bit. And I'm only saying that because when she runs through my house, she doesn't run into anything. And if I were to bring Reese into the house, she would be a bull in a china shop. Like, she cannot see a shadow. She cannot see anything. And she runs into me all the time. Well, I'll be in the stall with her, and even though she could smell me, she'll bump right into me. But Truffle, I think that she can see maybe shadows, or maybe has like good straight on vision, but her peripherals are really bad because she'll like graze into things. Like, she'll cut corners too tight. But if she's walking straight ahead on something, she will not walk into it. So, yeah, we're not really sure, but it's usually a birth defect.
Do other sanctuaries, you mentioned Goats of Anarchy, do other sanctuaries come to you because of your medical background for help?
Yeah, I have a few very close friends, other sanctuaries that I'm very close with that will, we have group chats and things like that. I'm bouncing cases back and forth with each other and asking for my advice on if something should go to the hospital, or, medications to use, or techniques and things like that. So I would definitely say yes. There's probably a handful of people that I talk to on a regular basis about medical stuff.
Now, you have horses that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about your background with horses?
Yeah, so I grew up riding. I grew up taking horseback riding lessons, doing the whole, very, very low key and small level, but competing in like little gymkhana competitions. So like barrel racing and doing like different patterns and such with your horses. And I've owned a couple of horses throughout my life. And just sort of as I've aged and just become an adult and got my first job out of college, it was a equine vet tech. And so I only did horses, and we would travel around, and the practice that I worked for was extremely well known, and all they did was the very high end performance horses. So we would go walk into a barn that was, cleaner than my house, and you could eat off the floors, and the horses were immaculate and extremely well cared for. But we would be there for 6 hours doing lameness exams on every single horse and injecting steroids and, a form of hyaluronic acid, essentially a joint lubricant, into their joints just to be able to get them sound enough to get to the show ring to then get the owner, win the owner's money. And that's what I did for 2 years. And, I just got really sick of it. I got sick of all of the amount of work that went into keeping these horses up to this level of performance that the owners wanted them that isn't natural for them. Horses aren't meant to be jumping 5-foot walls and, being run around in rings and doing all of these crazy movements and things like that. And so that was my personal decision to leave that job, just because I didn't like it. I didn't share, like, my morals were very different than, what people thought who owned these horses. And, they felt like I don't know if they felt like they owed them something, or they just thought they were such great performance animals. But, we're basically taping these horses together with Band-Aids and glue to get them to the show ring for them to do one course to jump as high as it possibly can jump. And then, okay, that's it. And then it just wasn't worth it. And I didn't think it was right, I guess. I don't know. So it sort of made me reconsider my career path. And so I switched over to a mixed animal practice where we just did farm animals. We don't do horses, just farm animals and cats and dogs. And when we bought our new property in North Haven, I decided I wanted to have a retirement farm for horses. So people who had rode their horses, their whole lives and still really wanted to keep them and own them and were totally fine with the expense that goes along with that. I provide a safe place, and with my medical background, it's typically necessary for older and retired horses because they usually come with a lot of baggage. And so we board retired horses here, and the money that's left over, we have an LLC, it's called Padlock Farm, and the money that's left over from boarding goes directly to the sanctuary.
That's great. I love that idea. So the horses that are retired, you basically take care of them for their owners who have decided that they're no longer riding them anymore?
Correct. And usually, so it's a small operation. We only have 4 retired horses, and then my own personal horse, who I've had since he was a baby. So 4 horses, they're all retired for one reason or another, age or injuries. And I just really respect the people who choose to pay for retirement for their horses versus dumping them at an auction, dumping them on a sanctuary, selling them to a child to then ride for lessons and just run their poor old bodies into the ground. And I really just respect the people who are like, nope, this is my horse and I've had him his whole life. And, they've done X, Y, Z for me. And, I'm going to give them the retirement they deserve. And so we take care of them here. And they kind of just hang out. They don't have to do a lot. The big thing with them here is that most of them do have injuries or reasons why they can't be out in like a giant field. So we have small, sort of paddocks for the horses where they're attached to their stalls. So it's really important for older horses to be able to be constantly moving around, but it's not great for horses with old injuries to have access to running and romping through fields. So my setup is very much catered to the injured or older horse that shouldn't be romping around. So we have stalls attached to their little areas outside where they can come and go as they please. They make friends with the other older horses, and lots of them are on a ton of medications, supplements, injections daily. And so I sort of cater to that crowd of people who really want somebody with a medical background to keep a very close eye on their pet that, they've had their whole life.
Now, when you were an equine vet tech, you weren't vegan, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you feel that in some way that the issues that you had with those horses being shot up in order to get to the show ring didn't align with your values and you were starting to lean that way at that time?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think I really processed it or put it together until the sanctuary, because a lot of people would ask why I have the horses here if they're not part of the sanctuary. And so I would explain it to them. And then I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like I probably was starting to lean that way to choosing like a more compassionate lifestyle for animals. And I didn't even realize it. It was like my subconscious telling me like, hey, this isn't cool and you don't like this. So let's try to not do it.
What is it about rehabilitating animals that makes you so passionate?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I really, really like to be able to take an animal that I know I can fix when people are just so quick to euthanize it. Like take Graham, for example, the lamb that had the broken leg. The farmers walked outside, found him in the field with a dangling broken leg. And they went to work that morning. They came back and he was born. So like he was hours old. And they were like, yeah, no, we're not dealing with that. Like they said that they have a $500 cap for each of their animals for medical expenses. And I was like, well, this visit and x-rays alone are $500. And so I offered them to take him and they were like over the moon. They were actually very nice. They gave me a $200 donation, which I've never had happen before. And they were like, thank you so much, but like seeing him from this like broken little sad, decrepit lamb that was left in a field to bouncing around like a nut job over here, like, and so happy. It just makes me so happy because like, if I wasn't there at the right place at the right time, he would have been euthanized for a broken leg. It's like, could you imagine euthanizing your child for a broken leg? Like when you really put it like that, it's like the amount of compassion that it literally just takes to like, all you have to do is give the amount of compassion that you give to like your kids, to your animals. It's really not that hard. But yet the disconnect is just so real. Like people just don't, there are so many people who don't see them that way. And it's so satisfying and it makes me so happy. Like, yeah, okay, it was almost $10,000 for this little lamb, but if it was my child, there would be no amount of money that would make me be like, yep, all right, let's put him down. Like, it's just like not even a question to me. So I just get it's such a satisfaction knowing like I've now gave him a life that he's going to live for the next 10 plus years here and be a face for social media to see like, hey, look at this care, like the small amount of care that I've done in this short period of time is going to give him a long, beautiful life. And like, that's all it takes.
Why do you feel people have that disconnect?
I think because they don't process like where their food's coming from. The disconnect is easy. Like if you gave the average family of 4 and you put a cow in their backyard and you said, if you want to eat this cow, you need to slaughter it and do all the things to it in order for it to end up on your plate, I bet you the majority of the American population will be vegetarian.
Right.
I think the big disconnect comes from they don't have to do the dirty work. They don't have to see it. They don't have to hear about it because you can choose, like, everyone says like, oh, show somebody the movie or the Netflix show Dominion and they'll stop eating meat. But unless you sit there and force somebody and tie their arms behind their back and make them watch it, they can choose to live in bliss and they can choose to live in, this happy world where, oh, this magic steak just appears on my plate and no suffering had to happen. Like, no, so I think it's just because they don't have to be involved in the terrible and gruesome details of it.
Along those lines, do you think that we should show documentaries to kids in schools so that they understand where their steak or meat is coming from?
That's a good question. I think it's a very touchy subject with people and how they want their children, like what information they want their children to be shown. I think it should be a to get to the point. Yes, I do think that kids should be more informed on where the food is coming from. I mean, you see those videos online, like the young toddler making a comment like, oh, like, but why are we eating, like, I'm just using a general, like, I don't specifically know one off the top of my head, but essentially like a child putting together like where their food has come from at such a young age, and then like choosing to not eat meat, and their parents being like, no, it's okay, like we eat meat. So it's like almost innate for kids to not want to be harming animals, and then their parents in society push them in the opposite direction and make them feel like it's okay. So I feel like if we were to give kids more of a choice, like if cafeterias were to start serving, I mean, this might be the case already, I don't know, I've been out of school for however long, but if cafeterias were to start serving plant-based food options, or letting them, like, not serving meat options on certain days, like Meatless Monday, and like I just don't feel like that is shown to children at such a young age, and that's when they're so like malleable. Like that's when their decision making, like that's when they are growing into the person that they're going to be. And most of us haven't started out vegan or vegetarian. We've learned the hard way, and by the hard way I mean watching things like Dominion or rescuing farm animals, or however your journey started. It usually starts later in life, but I think if the society as a whole made a transition to teaching young kids about veganism at a younger age, then I think we get a lot more younger vegans instead of this like midlife thing where we change everything because we found something out terrible.
Now let's get back to your vegan journey. You mentioned that when you rescued JD, that's when you changed to being vegan. Was it all at once, or was it a slow process?
It was literally overnight. Like I rescued him and I was like, nope, I'm done. And like I said, I was already vegetarian at that point, and so it was very easy. But when I say vegetarian, all I ate was chicken. I wasn't eating red meat. So I had probably been like a year without red meat. And then, so that process was longer. So like a year without red meat. And then I was eating chicken for about a year. And then as soon as I rescued JD, I was like, nope, no more dairy. And it was easier for me to go vegan than it was to go vegetarian in terms of just cutting out chicken, just because it was like the main source of protein, because I'm severely lactose intolerant. So I really didn't, the only like dairy I really consumed was like butter that was like in things. Like I'm not a cheese person. Like I don't really do yogurt, milk, that kind of stuff. So, and I was already like drinking almond milk and stuff like that. So it was very easy for me to kind of make the switch, honestly. And I have a very bad IBS, and it's been like life-changing for me. So like thinking about ever like consuming dairy again, I'm just like, oh God, no way.
Now, was there anything holding you back from becoming vegan? You mentioned when you were in equine tech that you weren't vegan, and then it took a while until you got to rescuing JD that you changed over to being vegan. Was there anything holding you back between those two times?
No, I guess just not being informed. Like I said, I was really just eating chicken and a little bit of dairy, and I I didn't really even know about like the vegan world until we started our sanctuary, which is 2019. And there was 2 years. So after I was an equine tech, I started the mixed animal practice in 2017. So it was 2017 to 2019. And in 2019, I started the sanctuary. And then like a year later, I became vegan. So when I started the sanctuary, I was like, okay, no more meat. When we rescued our first cow was when I went full vegetarian, which was a year prior to JD. And I was like, okay, well, I guess like even for me, like it was a little bit of a disconnect because like I was always rescuing goats and I never saw goats as an animal to eat. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not eating any of the animals I'm rescuing. And then when I got Bubbles, our first cow, I was like, okay, nope, can't eat meat anymore. Like, I love this little boy. Like, how could people ever eat them? And that's what, like, I really do feel so strongly about people who don't have a direct line of communication with an animal that they would otherwise be eating. It's very easy to make that disconnect. Like I said, if having people come, I've had so many people come for tours or volunteers that have gone vegetarian. And I think it's also, it's like baby steps, you know. I'm not a big person that will like push veganism in all my Instagram posts and do all this because it speaks for itself. People are more offended when you're showing awful videos and awful footage of cows in slaughterhouses, etc. And they'll more likely to unfollow you and stop consuming your content if you're trying to shove veganism down their throat versus me showing them videos of me cuddling with my cow. People who see those videos of me cuddling my cow make the connection. And I've literally had dozens of people message me, reach out to me and say these exact things. I've unfollowed some sanctuaries because they show terrible things, and then I see your animals and like you cuddling with them, and I've chosen to not eat meat because of it. So like I have experience / evidence that my way of, I guess, activism is more productive, at least with my audience, than you know, that aggressive sort of shoving it down their throat type of activism.
Now, what's one thing that's exciting you right now with your sanctuary?
Everything. The fact that it's 72 degrees out today. I did chores in a t-shirt this morning. It was beautiful. We are in the process of trying to fundraise for a special needs barn. We're calling it Peachy's Barn. So we're kind of doing that. And also just sort of, I love this time of year because it's like we're cleaning up from the winter, like spring cleaning. We're getting everything all tidy. We are getting a dumpster in a few weeks. So we're throwing out some stuff that's just been kind of accumulating over the winter, and you know, just a general excitement for the weather coming, honestly.
Now, what cookbook or book have you gifted most to someone transitioning to a plant-based diet?
I'm actually a terrible person because I like don't cook. I'm like a very like I'm the worst. I'm like a very
lots of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Literally all my friends call me like a trash vegan. Like, I'm not joking. It's terrible. I eat like frozen foods, and like Boca burgers are my like staple. I put them in like it's bad. So I don't give anybody a cookbook. I'm the worst.
Do you have a documentary that you recommend?
Dominion. Honestly, like if I think people should watch it. I think it's scary. It's not a feel good documentary. It's terrifying and it's awful. But if you want to know where your food comes from and you're like open to like why you should live a plant-based life, that's really quite eye-opening.
Finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
That is a good question. I would say before I went vegan, empty, I guess maybe is a good word. And now that I am vegan, I just feel so fulfilled, honestly. And I don't know if that correlates with necessarily, I think it's a combination of being vegan and running the sanctuary. I feel so fulfilled, and I don't think one could come without the other.
Empty and fulfilled. I love it. I love it. It's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What's the best way for people to follow and support you on Instagram, the web, Patreon?
Yeah. So we do have Patreon, but to find us, you can find us at road, the number 2 refuge _sanctuary _CT on Instagram, or you could just type in Road to Refuge. It'll come up at the top. And we do have a Patreon. It's the best way to support all the animals here, even if it's just for $1 a month. And all the links are in our bio on Instagram.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.